What is going on, everybody? I am the original gamer, StevieStrow, and he is...
Curtis Boyle, the host of the Coco Game site.
There we go, and that is Curtis Boyle. And we're doing something, I don't know if it's unique, but it's interesting to me. Anyways, we're doing something at least that I haven't done before. And this is going to be a showcase or a comparison, or whatever you want to call it, of games that started in the arcade or other platforms and ultimately made their way to the color computer. And we're going to start with a very cool arcade classic from Atari called Tempest. And is there anything you would like to say about Tempest, Curtis, while I start playing it?
Well, Tempest was one of the first 3D perspective color vector games. It was created by a programmer at Atari who actually had a nightmare that he based the video game on, stuff crawling out of a whole atom.
Wow.
To make it into a paranoid video game, and that's what came out of it. So it features, like I said before, color vector graphics, so it scales really well. The emulators, I mean, you can use a really fine resolution, but the original game is actually, actual beams, straight vector beams. And it's quite an original game. There was nothing else like it in the arcade at the time or on any other platform.
Yeah, and I think I have a super zapper too. Yeah, I have a super zapper. That's your super gun that will kill everything on the screen. I believe in the arcade, was it a wheel that you turned to steer yourself?
It was like a paddle wheel.
It was an analog 360-degree wheel that you could spin yourself around in. And the vector graphics are kind of like this line art graphics here that you can see on the screen. Now, this particular version of Tempest, which is the arcade version, but it's part of a new collection that's called the Atari Vault for the PC that I just got off of Steam. And there's a lot of different versions of this game that have been emulated, but I think this version is emulating Vector very well. Vector was a very interesting type of technology where there was perfectly straight lines drawn on the screen from point A to point B. And unlike the other form of graphics that's known as rasterized graphics, when you tried to draw a diagonal line, it looked like a staircase. You could see the individual pixels because of the resolution and stuff. With Vector, it was a perfectly straight line.
And that was based on how the gun worked. So for a raster, the gun goes horizontally across, draws all the stuff across in the screen, then jumps to the next line and goes down and keeps going, and then it has its vertical refresh where it goes back to the top. Whereas a vector one will actually draw a line from point to point any direction of the screen. So it's literally drawing the exact lines you're looking at.
Is it a different screen? Is it still a standard CRT? Is it just a different way to address this?
Yeah, it's still in the tubes, etc. that would light up as the vector beam hit it. But just that the gun that actually aims the beam, instead of going in the zigzag horizontal line pattern, it would literally draw directly point to point.
Yeah, so what I do like about this is that this version from the Atari Vault emulates that vector screen very well. I've tried this on the MAME emulator and a few other emulators, and MAME, for whatever reason, didn't do a good job, from what I recall, showing like different contrasts between like a gray and a bright white and things like that. This one seems to have a very good emulation on the brightness and everything else that I really enjoy. So this was a cool game, right? So this is a game by Atari. You can recognize the sound effects. These are very Atari-esque sounding things. This is a cool 360 shooter. The difficulty would increase over time, etc. The playing fields would change. Sometimes you could go completely around in a circle like I'm doing now. Sometimes the playing field would change. I remember one level was just kind of like horizontal, and you could only move from left to right.
Yeah.
So this is the original. This was the version you pumped quarters into, and hopefully you got your money's worth. But we're going to show you a couple other versions of this, a couple of other ports or clones of this. So what we just saw here was the original Tempest from Atari in the arcade. The next one we're going to show you is a slightly less glamorous version, but it's the Atari 2600 version of a Tempest, also made by Atari for the Atari platform. But let's just say it's just a wee bit blocky. But stay tuned for that. We'll be right back, and we will show you the Atari 2600 version of Tempest. Hey guys, it's the original gamer StevieStrow here, and I want to talk to you about the Coco Crew podcast, hosted by John Linville and Neil Blanchard. It is a delicious journey into retro computing featuring the Tandy Color Computer. So if you are into vintage computing, retro computing, old school gaming, and especially if you're a Coco nut who's into the color computer, you gotta check out the Coco Crew podcast at cococrew.org, also available on iTunes and Stitcher. And tell them the original gamer StevieStrow sent you. Alright, well what we're looking at here is Tempest for the Atari 2600. This again is Atari's game made on one of Atari's systems. And due to some of the limitations of the Atari 2600, let's just say it doesn't look quite as good as it did in the arcade. And I'm being quite gracious with that
You're
statement.
the master of understatement.
So, the Atari 2600, it didn't have the best graphics, but there were games and there were people who pushed the system much further than Atari themselves did. Atari got a little lazy with their software. But when you look at games like Demon Attack, great game. You look at games from Activision and iMagic and some of the third parties, there were some really good titles for the 2600 that exploited the capabilities. So unfortunately, this was not one of those titles. But this is an officially ported version of Tempest for the Atari 2600, and I think we've beat this horse to death. And let's move on to a color computer version of the game.
At Gsoft, we make games for the TRS-80 Color Computer, TRS-80 MC10, and Dragon computers. Our basic games cover the range of genres from arcade, to text adventures, to simulations, to 3D dungeon crawls. This is our latest puzzle game from Japan, Fruit Panic. So come on and drop by our website and download our latest games.
Okay, what we're looking at here is a cool game called Storm from Computerware, and this is the Color Computers version of Tempest, and this is what's known as a clone. It's not a port because we don't have the same name. We don't have permission from the publisher to make the game officially, so this is an unofficial version of Tempest, and this was very popular, and so this is what's known as a clone of a game, and this is it. And so it is called Storm. And this is using the semi-graphics mode as well. And you can start off on any of the 15 levels. And one of the things you'll notice, and I'll put a link to Curtis's website in the description to this video, but Curtis has got screenshots of all 15 levels. And after you've gone through the 15 rounds, which are all in blue, then it turns to red. And does it change colors after red? Do you know? Because you probably
I haven't got that far yet, so I don't know for sure. But
so
the
what I'll
difficulty
do,
level definitely goes up as it starts to repeat.
I'm going to start off on level 9, and if I survive, this is going pretty quickly. Now what you see here is that, again, this is in semi-graphics mode, which is a lower resolution, so you can see the kind of staircase effect of those lines. And that was a nice thing about vector graphics, was that vector was a perfectly straight line on any angle, on any degree. And so vector is nowhere near sharp. And this particular version of vector is about as low as you can get, but it was the lowest resolution, but the highest color on our color computer.
Yeah. Actually, the vertical resolution wasn't bad. There's 192 lines vertically on the screen, which is the same as P Mode 4, which is the highest res mode we had. It's the horizontal that's bad. It's 64 pixels wide. Basically.
Right. I'm going to go ahead and try level 15 for grins and giggles, and if I survive, then we'll see it flip over to another round. I'm just going to kind of go in circles here, but here's the problem with doing that. You run out of shots. You don't have unlimited ammo. Now, there's got to be a...
Now, you can time it a bit. You can only shoot when you see them coming out, so you're not wasting your ammo quite as often.
Right. Do you know what the super zap button is on this? It's got to be a key.
I have not figured that out. I don't even know if there is one. I didn't use it.
Because it says gun recharged, unless that's just
oh, yeah,
your
then you're right.
gun.
There must be a zapper. All right.
I'm dying. I'm dying. Game over. Well, we'll try it on level 1 time. But the cool thing is that you go to Curtis's website. I'll put the link in the description. There is a picture of all 15 rounds. And then after you've gone through all 15 rounds, it'll start over in round 1 again, but it'll be red instead of blue. I'm assuming the arcade did that, although I don't think I did that well in the arcade.
No, I never did either, so I couldn't tell you.
A lot of things flying at you. Some of them will just fly at you and then fly off the screen. Some of them will make it to the top and chase you down like that one, the millibars, which were in red. So yeah, this was a cool game. So I would say this looks just a notch above the 2600 version. Again,
I would absolutely say that.
Again, my understatement abilities precede me. So yeah, not a bad game. Let's just see if I can make it to level 2 on this one.
Yeah.
And so
the playability is similar. I mean, the spinning round, like if you actually had a trackball or the paddle style controller with the spinning knob, it actually does play quite similar to the arcade. The feel is there, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I just died. I get confused because I don't have the wheel. I can't just roll it, so I have to remember that I have to left and right kind of become relative at this point. So I made it to level 2. But yeah, so that was kind of cool. So we're going to do more of these. We're going to do more games where we are going to show you the arcade version and other platform versions, and then ultimately what the color computer version looked like as well. And what you've just witnessed now is Storm, which is a clone of the arcade game Tempest, and we hope you enjoyed it. I have been the original gamer. This guy down here has been
Curtis Boyle of the Coco Game site.
And we will see you all next time. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye. And we're going to start this in 3. Hold on now. Where the hell is my camera looking at me? I'm not centered. I always have this frickin' issue. I can never get this straight. Remind me to edit that out. All right, we're going to start this in 3,